Yes. We're continuing in a series of sermons based in an attitude of praise and faith and benediction and glorification and gratitude. All those words that traditional churches have used and that sometimes Unitarian Universalists shy away from, coming out of different traditions, and sometimes that's been a difficult transition to leave. And so how do we, as Unitarian Universalists, claim that attitude of praise and yet not advocate a particular belief system that could be interpreted or indeed be oppressive? But how do we access that? And the four particular principles that we were working with was having faith in the prophets that have gone on before us and being able to receive their words, being able to praise and have a sense of glorification, and having a sense of gratitude and being living out of a sense of generosity, and then having faith in the unseen, which may be the most difficult for some of us, because we like to see and touch and read and feel. we like that, so the faith in the unseen will be helpful. Today's particular emphasis will be about something I think we're all quite familiar with. Have you ever had information or desire or something you wanted to do, and you wanted to share that with your partner, but at the same time you knew that your partner had to be in the right mood to receive what you were going to share? Have you ever had that experience? All the time, right? So there's a relationship between the external word, there's a relationship between the external stories and histories and your own desires and the emotional field and disposition of the person to receive this information. Generally, that's a skill we learn by trial and error. When to say certain things and communicate certain things in a relationship, and we get attuned to that, or that makes relationships difficult. That wisdom of when to combine knowledge and information and thoughts about others and one's emotional and spiritual disposition is at the heart of this sermon. And let us not forget that, at least in this expression of Unitarian Universalism, that kindness is our central principle. Learning to be kind to self, learning to be kind to one another, learning to be kind to the planet, learning to be kind in our thinking about ourselves and others is the central principle in which we operate. Now, why that sometimes brings difficulty, because that sense of kindness is a physiological sense. It's part of our body. It's part of who we are. It's not a thought. It's not a belief. It's how we are and exist in this world and how we present ourselves to others. In a sense, we work to develop this sense of kindness. The kindness itself becomes a container in which we live. Usually, and often, and we struggle with, we live in a container of belief systems. I believe in that, I think this, and that kind of defines who we are and creates our identity, what we're attached to. But to shift away from that into a sense of kindness rather than thoughts and beliefs about kindness is difficult to do. And so one way to imagine that is that there is a container in which we live, and that container is marked by the sense of kindness. And you know when that container is disrupted, or you know when that container is broken. You can feel it. You can feel it in the experience when you share that information with your partner and you chose the wrong time to share it. Sometimes that kindness is broken. Or you can even feel it within yourself when a thought comes to you that you're not being kind to yourself and you're judging yourself harshly. That container of kindness is broken. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, would teach us that if we have this container of kindness and it's disrupted, he suggests that we may be finding what he would call a knot in life. Something inside of us that has happened historically we're not yet finished with, that kind of knots up inside of us, that when something comes toward us or somebody says something to us we have a strong reaction to. We've identified what he calls a knot within our imagination, a knot within our psyche, that our energy is knotted up. And part of the spiritual work is to undo the knots so that we can be at ease with ourselves. A psychoanalytical writer, Winnicott, D.W. Winnicott, he would suggest that those knots are an expression or a reaction to something called impingements. That we're going along in life and things are okay, we're feeling at ease with ourselves, and all of a sudden something comes in and we feel ourselves being emotionally reactive to it. It's an impingement. It causes us to tense up. It causes us to knot up. And spiritual and psychological healing is about soothing those out. Now, how many of you have ever had the experience where there has been an impingement or this reaction that comes in and is a knot, and it takes you days to get over it? Weeks to get over it. Part of one thing I've learned in counseling is not that you eliminate all the problems. It's that sometimes when an event happens, rather than that negative feeling lasting for 2 weeks, maybe that negative feeling will only last for an hour. And that's success, and that is new life. Winnicott does something curious, whereas Thich Nhat Hanh and others, they say this is the inner experience of who we are, and we have to wrestle with that, and certainly we do. But this other way of thinking says that these experiences happen in the space between us. He gets us out of ourselves. And he says that the space between us is what we need to understand and what we need to be about, what we need to be honoring, and what we need to be paying attention to. How is that space between us? What's going on in that space between us? Have you ever walked in a room and you're feeling okay? So you just had a good experience outside and you walk into a room and the next thing you know, you're going, this is intense in here, and you can really tell it. See? And that's the space in between people, and you might want to address it. But to be able to become conscious of that space that's between yourself and the other, yourself and the planet. How many of you have seen images, or how many of you have ever walked and you've witnessed something going on with the planet, with the river, with the ocean, and that space between you just gets either depressed or joyful? Now, I would suggest in terms of giving information or trying to talk to a partner, if you're talking, if your partner likes, say, the New York Giants, 7 o'clock tonight would not be the best time to communicate that information. So that timing is important. Or when New England scores a touchdown, you don't want to talk to your Giants. Right. So that kind of time is important. And the same thing is important when we have an experience outside. If you want to tell somebody you love them for the first time, or that you care about them and you really want them to hear it, you're very careful about your timing. You might even begin to manipulate the environment so that the news is heard the way you want it to be heard. Flowers, dinner, whatever you might do to manipulate your partner to get them feeling better, to hear what you have to say, that you're going on the vacation 2 weeks that they can't go on, whatever it might be. Whatever it might be that we do. Okay. Last week we talked about, I'm not going anywhere. Last week we were talking about being able to receive the truth from prophets from history as part of what it means to develop spiritual, to some sense of spiritual maturity, what that does. And then we also talked about being able to praise and have that sense of glorification. We talked about the nature of praise being that experience, say with nature, where you are caught up and you can let go of yourself. You're just gone, whether it's a sunset, whether it's watching children play, or whether it's finding a shell on the beach we talked about, whatever it might be, or whether it's hearing a sound, and that you are really taken away from yourself, and there's an attitude of being at ease and being at one with the whole. And really the only way to identify that is it's not an act of praise, praise just happens, is that upon reflection. And that's a kind of an example of praise in which it doesn't relate to a belief system. You don't solicit it. It just happens to us. And we have to prepare ourselves to allow that to happen. For example, yesterday I found a beautiful spot. Now you're surrounded by houses and humans and noise, and sometimes your spirit you just want to move out to just to be in nature and not to hear so much noise. Well, I found this. You don't want to be thankful for the decline in the housing market, but at the same time, I found this road on the outside of Port St. Lucie. On the other side of that road is just fences and cows and birds and all kinds of lakes and neat things. And on this other side, and it's the outskirts. They built this road, but they didn't finish the community. So I found that. So I was riding my bike on that road, and I stopped and was sitting, and I heard this noise. And I had my eyes closed, and I said, "What's that noise?" So that noise captured me. It took me away from myself. And so in a way, in the space between me and that noise, there was a merger. And it was a wonderful experience. And I couldn't figure out what it was. So then I opened my eyes, and there was this cow 30 feet from me on the other side of the fence just moving along. And here comes a bunch more after that. I guess it was leading them through. And that's an attitude. In a sense, I'm going to say that's an attitude of praise that we Unitarian Universalists can say, yes, there is a one-ment and at ease of who we are as human beings with this planet and in community with one another. And we need to work our spiritual lives so we have those kind of experiences. Now, when we take those four experiences, receiving the words from the prophetic history, being in an attitude of praise and grace. Zia Inyet Khan talks about that those two, before we can get to an attitude of generosity, before we can get to the faith in the absent, before we can even get there, there is a relationship between that sense of receiving the words from history and that sense of being in an attitude of praise and an attitude of grace. And he's saying before you can move on, those two have to merge. That you prepare yourself somehow to be in this state of grace where love and harmony is a union within yourself. That comes first. Then you hear the words from our faith ancestors. Then you do that, not before. See, part of that Sufi tradition from which he's talking about, and part of any mystical aspect, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Judaism, it doesn't matter. Part of it, the central piece is that we are in a process of transformation. So when we talk about that container, and we can identify a highly charged emotional reaction that doesn't do any of us any good, but there it is. And many of us might look at that in a negative and judge ourselves in a negative way. And I'm saying, no, not at all. We all have that. None of us have this pure container of kindness as we relate to one another and relate to this planet. We all have those knots. We all have those impingements. And our spiritual pilgrimage, our spiritual path, is to identify them rather than create intrapsychic defenses against them. We need to create a way that we approach them, not avoid them. And so that's what he's talking about when we move to this attitude of praise and glory. We go inside, we can identify the impingements, we can identify the emotional reactions, and we can bring healing to them, and we can identify our spiritual cutting edge. Because that is our spiritual cutting edge, when we identify those knots. So when we work to gain that attitude of love and harmony and in the sense of praise, to prepare ourselves to hear the words from the prophets, to hear the words from our faith ancestors, to hear the words from, say, Margaret Fuller, which I will read. Oh, I thought it was, oh yes, here they are. Now, when I first read these words, here I know I'm going to talk about softening ourselves up within so that we can hear words from history and from our faith ancestors. So I'm wanting to hear words like love and peace and good stuff. You know, wonderful stuff. So Margaret Fuller, one of our Unitarian Universalist faith ancestors, if you ever read the biography of Margaret Fuller, and I would say read that. It was a wonderful story. But before you get to the last chapter, I'm going to tell you the end. Have some Kleenex, because you'll need it. So here's words from her that I'm supposed to, at least according to this Sufi teacher, to bring some sense of praise to us. I'm supposed to hear with a sense of gratitude and a sense of grace and harmony. And one reason, but I forgot, one reason why we manipulate others to hear us, or be direct, whatever that might be, is that we want what we say to sink in. We want what we say to be heard. Have you ever had anybody kind enough to say to you, I'm not in a place to hear that right now. We need to wait till I am because I really want to hear what you have to say. Those are beautiful words. Because what that means is that person really cares enough to hear what you have to say, and they know that they're not able to do that at that moment in time. And we'll get preoccupied and we can't. But to really say, we need to stop and do that. Or somebody say to you, we just need to stop what we're doing because I have something I want to say, because I want to be heard so it'll sink in deep. And that's what this is about. So that we work with ourselves to soften ourselves up so these words can sink in deep for the purpose of changing us. For the purpose of becoming that container, having a stronger sense of kindness. So I've come across these words by Margaret Fuller. Right. In the chamber of death, I prayed in very early years. And she did, because she was reading at 12, 13, 11 different works and was being taught. So in her early years, she's talking early years. In the chamber of death, I prayed in very early years. Give me truth. Cheat me by no illusion. Oh, the granting of this prayer is sometimes terrible to me. I walk over the burning plowshares and they sear my feet. Yet nothing but the truth will do. My first reaction was, I don't know how deep I want that to sink in me. Because am I committed, and we say our 7 principles every week, am I committed to seek out the truth when it will sear my feet? Am I committed to seek out the truth when I've been avoiding the truth all my life about something? And if I am, how do I need to prepare myself to hear that truth so it's transformative rather than judgmental? Softening up my inside, who I am. Can you imagine yourself? Usually when we do that, we go to our partners or somebody close. But can you imagine yourself without anxiety, without worries about tomorrow, without your history impinging upon the here and now, without any negative thoughts about yourself or others, empty of those things, empty of the concerns for tomorrow, empty of the concerns of the political environment, empty of the concerns for the planet, empty of the concerns for the church, just without anxiety. Without those places and events in our history that come upon us and capture us periodically and sometimes torment us, aggravate us, without that, who would you be? Who would you become? If we genuinely could let go of the anxieties, of the hurtful things, of the dysfunctional reactions to memories, of the intense anxiety, and this container of kindness were entire. The container of kindness that was all of who we are. Who would you be in the absence of those things? Who would you be becoming? What would you be like? Yeah, in your imagination. Who would you be without fear? What would you be like? Inyat Khan teaches that when we practice this, that when I was sitting and hearing the cow coming through the grass, that at that moment in time, that I become saturated with that here and now experience. That everything else is gone, and I become saturated. He said, this is the straight path, the awake path, the path of moment by moment, breath by breath, inhaling the creation that is shown to us, breathing its perfume. There's something similar to that in the Unitarian history. But to go back a few years, I think it was 1643, so it's a few years. And this is a report from a British person visiting a Unitarian community in Raquel. A British visitor reported that he saw, after visiting Raquel, a town in Little Poland, where the heresy of the Socinians, that's us, the Socinians are Unitarians, so even then we were considered heretics, where the heresy of the Socinians flourishes greatly. This is us. We are the Socinians. He felt as though he had been transported into another world, for whereas elsewhere was full of war and turmoil, and if you know your history, there were religious wars going on between different expressions of Protestantism as Reformation was happening. But in this town, where the Unitarian heretics lived, there was all quiet. And people were calm and modest in behavior, so that you would think you were among the angels. Although they were spirited in debate and expert in language. That would be us Unitarians, right? Loving, but we will argue. But that's the point about that container and living in that container of kindness and having as our spiritual process, I guess, our spiritual life, healing those places so that container can become strong. We can debate anything if kindness is the foundation. We can have any discussion if kindness is the foundation. It's when that container of kindness, that physical sense of kindness is broken, we can't have particular conversations. Because when it's broken, the beliefs that move around that brokenness become more important than kindness. And our spiritual life in this house is that kindness is more important than any right or wrong position, than any belief. The space between us needs to be calm and caring, and then we can have that spirited debate and still be angels. I like that. We can do that. So angels are present. It is us who has the potential to be that. So when we practice our spiritual lives, and we're going to read history, our faith tradition, or prophets that have yet been integrated into our faith tradition, words that have yet to be integrated into our faith tradition, we are to prepare ourselves so that the beliefs of culture and society don't capture what we bring into us and interpret it in a way that's not helpful and not transformative. We're to prepare ourselves so that we are alert to what's coming into us and how we should integrate it or not integrate it. So as we leave this place today, I hope you go listen to the cows walk through the grass and hear the birds in the morning, hear the waves, feel the breeze upon your face, and know that as we move beyond ourselves and we become more than who we are today, we will be kinder and there will be greater love and harmony and compassion among us. Now, for you new folks, at this time we have discussion, spirited, kindly debate, or comments or clarification. Yes, sure.
Okay, I was listening. What do you say that if we want to go to